Welcome to the Talk With Kiet podcast, where we connect people, ideas, and capital to help make a difference in the world. Today, I am so lucky to have Kevin MacDonald on the call with us. Kevin is a co-founder of two extremely successful fintech software company, Wall Street Office and Black Mountain Systems, which both had very successful exits. Kevin and I today will talk about his extensive career and entrepreneurial journey, as well as life after exit. Kevin, welcome to the podcast.
Kit, thanks a lot for having me. Appreciate it.
No, so Kevin, how we start the podcast is really around origin story, and you have a very interesting origin story with you starting out as a developer and then founding software companies and playing various roles as they scale. So why don't we start with where do you start your career and how do you get started?
Sure. Yeah. No, my career started back in college. I went to UC San Diego, was working on my electrical engineering degree, but quickly realized I was more interested in software. So I just kind of took a bunch of electives in that. And, my first thing was coming across Microsoft Access and seeing that, this is pretty old now, but this is back in the early 90s. But, just kind of self-taught as I was going to school. And then I opened up a phone book and cold called companies to sell database solutions, and I got a couple jobs out of that, like a Porsche restorer, inventory and billing and things like that. And anyhow, via a friend of a friend, so to speak, came across an opportunity to write what ultimately became Wall Street Office, but it started with Microsoft Access and reverse engineering Excel spreadsheets. The old story of, getting things off of Excel into database systems, but using a pretty, basic technology like Microsoft Access. So anyhow, so I really started in college doing that. And I graduated and kind of had to make a decision. Do I want to get a real job as an electrical engineer, or do I want to go move to Dallas, and kind of pursue a more startup? So it was a finance company. But it had hired me to do this, and the idea was, hey, maybe this will turn into something. So, for the first, I don't know, six or 7 or 12 months or so, it was just, I was the developer, I was support, I was marketing, I was sales, I was creating business cards. But there was enough of a need there, and everybody was on Excel, so we were able to sell to ING, Merrill Lynch, MetLife. So little college, young college grad with a Microsoft Access database system was doing okay within, the finance company to help me, get people to take calls and such. But anyhow, then I realized that this was growing beyond what I could do as an individual. And certainly Microsoft Access at some point was not going to be the appropriate technology. So again, very old, old, this is still mid 90s kind of stuff, but we hired somebody, and then ultimately people, and we rewrote it in Visual Basic 6, and that became what is Wall Street Office. It's but it's evolved technologically, but a lot of the foundation, even from database structures and stuff, are back during the college years when I didn't know as much then as I knew now, but it worked out okay. So that was a 12-year ride for me in Dallas, and we sold to JP Morgan in December 2003. There was an earn-out component, and there's goals and things. So I stayed on for supposed to be 2 years, but I did it like 2.5, and then left to San Diego. As much as Dallas was an amazing experience, and we developed great friends and relationships, and enjoyed what I was doing, my wife and I decided we wanted to go back to San Diego. So with no plan and enough money to have options, but not enough money to not work again. Not that I certainly didn't. I wanted to work again, but with no plan whatsoever, really, we just kind of sold most of what we had, spent like 4 months in the Highlands of Scotland raising or potty training our two young children at the time, and really kind of detached from normal life, and had a wonderful experience. And then we're in on the Ardnamurchan, if I'm pronouncing it right, peninsula near the Isle of Mull. There's no smartphones, but I got a call on my little flip phone, and it was the guy, Wayne Elpis, who was telling me about this idea. And I had to literally climb up on top of a hill and overlook this spectacular setting to get the reception, and he was telling me about this idea. And I was like, okay, I don't know. I'm skeptical, but tell you what, at the very least, we can go into business as consultants. So why don't you line us up with a paid analysis engagement? And when I come back, we'll go to New York. We'll spend a week or 2 weeks there, and we'll figure this out. And if it's the idea, that's great. If it's our first consulting project, that's cool too. So anyhow, so we got back to the States and we did that and had an awesome time. And then, the first day we walk into the firm that had hired us to do this, and we start looking at their systems, and there are no real systems, which was what everyone was looking like at the time. It was Excel, it was Microsoft Outlook, and dot matrix printouts. And the thing that struck me most was, well, there's a few things, but one of them was a trader. I asked her, what makes your life difficult? And there's literally a 2-3 inch dot matrix printout on her desk, and she opens it up, starts flipping through it, and she's like, when I want to sell something, I got to go find it, and then I find it, and then I make a call, or someone calls me, we trade, and I find out that the $10.3 million amount on our dot matrix printout was already outdated because there was a pay down. And so this trade I did isn't totally valid. There might be fees. I've got to, it's just a big pain. And you walk to the compliance team and you had very similar conversations. So it's like the day one, I knew what my next part of my career was going to be. It was Wall Street office. I guess I didn't understand the market, but it was, once I got involved, it was clear how much of a need was there. This one was immediate. It's like, okay. And we're dealing with making, the top of the food chain, so to speak. We're making their lives easier. So, we imagine they have even more decision-making power. So, it's just something where the stars seem to align. So I knew that I was not capable of writing the software. I was kind of a okay developer, but not real that advanced. I was, had a lot of.
According to Steve Miller, he thinks you're an amazing developer.
Who says that? Yeah. You could talk to people I actually developed with, and they probably would say, he was okay. But anyways, I knew what needed to be built. And there was this tool we used at Wall Street office. I can't remember the name, but it had this workflow engine. It was for support ticketing and things like that. It wasn't ServiceNow or anything. It was well before that, but it was whatever. Anyhow, it had this cool workflow engine that was very easy to configure, but it's also very limiting. So that was when we were interviewing this one company, it was clear what they were doing was just pulling data together, orchestrating things, responding to systems, telling people to, assigning tasks to people, things of that nature. So this tool jumped out. It's like, man, that'd be great if this tool could be applied there, but it's so limiting. So in any case, long story short, not being a great developer, I could easily hard code stuff. So I created the screens and a trade ticket and a portfolio, sort of a reporting screen. Everything was just hard code. You could, what we call allocate, you could do a trade and spread it across portfolios with what looked like calculations, but it was the code was hit the button and just add numbers to the grid. So I just did all that. So it was more of a storyboard kind of thing that I kind of wrote during that. And we showed it to the people, and they were, the firm, and they were really excited about it. Yeah, okay, let's just start using it. I'm like, no, this is not real. It's about a year away from being real. But in any case, so that was the beginning of Black Mountain. So, some of the I guess takeaways, if you will, is there's certainly an aspect of the right place at the right time. I mean, nobody else was doing this stuff. Nobody else understood this stuff. And we had access from our experience at Wall Street office to these subject matter experts that wanted the problem solved. So that was great. Anyhow, so we started hiring a team, and that was, actually one thing that jumps out my memory of that was we had angel investors. So we started out on the angel investor track. So it was friends and family or work associates, people who knew us, say, from the Wall Street office days, that also knew about this problem. It's like 50,000 from this person, 25,000, maybe some wealthy person couldn't bother with less than 100. So fine, so we'll take that. But we got $2 million in commitment that would be staged out over payments. Say they do like 500,000, assuming we did what we were going to do. But I was new in San Diego, and so we had commitments. I can't remember if the money might have even been in the bank to some extent. But I was going out and looking for someone who could write what needed to be written in code that I knew I wasn't capable of, and I would go out and sell, hey, we're going to have free lunches, we're going to have an annual offsite, a lot of these things that we did from Wall Street office to create this, fun culture, work hard, sort of play hard culture. And then, people would come over, I'd talk to them and ask them questions. I'm like, oh man, I can't find anybody. So I started panicking. And then I found this one individual who was amazing. I could tell the resume, every word was relevant. It mattered. I could tell this person could write the code that, I was envisioning, or the architecture. He had that sort of background. So anyhow, long story short, this person turned me down twice. So I went to like the San Diego .NET developer group or whatever it was called. And I said, can I bring in pizza and pitch? So I was in like some, Qualcomm conference room or theater, and free pizza, and it sounds over the top, like above market salaries, and then the free lunches, the offsites, casual, we're going to be in a cool office in Del Mar. It's amazing. And I had a group of people, and I started asking questions, and I just none of them could do it. Like they were probably, worse than I was, or, no better than I was in terms of what needed to be done. And so I sat down, and I was panicking. I was depressed. I was in there for the rest of it. My head's in my hand, and I get a call, and this individual who I knew could do it, who had turned me down, calls me. And so right away I was like, he's not calling to reject me again. So he had a change of heart. And honestly, that moment there, I think, was probably the most critical from my perspective for Black Mountain being a success, because this individual who's still there, is still amazing, was, he's not the only person that had amazing contributions, but he was the foundation, if you will. We had a great team, and we had great culture, but it without great technology, and sort of technology that was at the time, advanced technology for what we're trying to do, I don't think Black Mountain would have been certainly nearly as successful, if successful at all. So anyhow, that's a long origin story. So I guess a couple things to round that out. So similar to Wall Street office for me, just coincidentally happened to be about a 12-year journey. So one of the partners came in within a year, but my sort of operating partner, Andy Horowitz, was from the banking industry. And we got to a point some years into it. We took, the $3 million, and then we grew organically. We deliberately managed to cash. We were, I think, generous and as generous as we could be with employees in terms of comp and benefits and annual offsites, and just trying to create a fun, work hard, play hard culture where people wanted to be there and work hard and be a part of it. But in any case, so Andy brought that banking sort of culture, and we got to a point where we took the initial money and everything else was organic. So we had positive cash flow, things were going good. So we got to a point where like, hey, who knows what happens? Let's take chips off the table. So Andy, fortunately, had enough experience where like, hey, if we want to do a transaction, we need to hire a banker. It's going to be terribly distracting, because he was on the other side distracting other people. He knew what it was going to look like. And it certainly was, but it was tremendous. I would not have known how important that was. Probably now I do, but anyhow, and he ran a process to where, or we together, but it's his idea, ran a process to bring in different bankers who were kind of familiar with our space, and they had to pitch to us. I had to fly to it was Charlotte at the time and pitch, and we ended up picking, I think it was a great process that we were extremely happy with who we selected. And then we ended up doing a deal with Stone Point Capital, which was a wonderful experience, and sold a majority to them, but they let us operate it, as if we still had a majority. They were very helpful with their network and, suggestions, but ultimately as long as we were performing reasonably well, they let us, continue the formula that was working. So that was wonderful. So that was March of 2015. Again, that was chips off the table, put some money in the bank, keep doing what we're doing, have them help us, connect us to more people, push us on ideas, things of that nature, be more formal than we were. And then once you sell to private equity, you have to sell again because that's the business model. They don't make money unless they're buying and selling businesses. So 4 years later, we sold to another private equity firm. We had strategic and financial options, so private equity or just selling outright. And I think we kind of were like, we've been doing this for 12 years. It's been a lot of fun. Not sure if we want to do something else, but when you go financially, you potentially have that option to stay involved. Well, you could stay involved if you go strategic, but it's a very different thing. It's definitely not your company. The brand goes away, you become part of something else. So we decided we really appreciated the option from the prior transaction. So let's do that again. And then some months into it, there was a merger, and it just, I don't think I was able to add the kind of value. It was a different scale. And so I decided to depart, gave sort of a month's notice, but then, so my last day was January of 2020. And I felt given what happened after that, I don't think I could have been any luckier. So I'm very appreciative that things unfold the way they did. I don't say I didn't have to deal with COVID, but I didn't have to deal with COVID and the working and the managing a company in that environment and all the other things that came along after that. So it worked out okay. So anyhow, that's my origin story.
No, and that's a great story. And now, before we touch on life after the exit, I just want to go backwards a bit. And you've highlighted something that's interesting, I think benefit for a lot of founders. That is, being clearly aware of what your strengths are and where your weaknesses are, is not asking the how or the what, but asking the who.
Yeah. The who is to me the most important. And that was like at Black Mountain, it evolved into, we defined our culture as fit, fun, innovative, transparent. So that transparent, everyone would say, was my number one thing, being comfortable having uncomfortable conversations, but fit, which encompasses all of, that was just our, playful acronym, but it's that culture, so trying to have a culture that is appealing to yourself, appealing to others, where you can attract and retain talent, amazing talent, and people that are willing to work hard, because there's massive sacrifice, that I've at least experienced, personally, family life, et cetera, to build a company and manage a company. And the people that probably contribute the most at those companies often probably feel similar, the level of effort they're putting in, and the care for the customer and the fellow employees and such. So anyhow, who you hire is just, I think incredibly important. I do, having been involved in looking at other companies, and I'm still involved in a couple companies, but I think there's a lot of stars that have to align to you can have the best people in the best company, but if the market doesn't go your way, where people need your product and can afford your product, right, you may not be successful. So there's just a lot, but you've got to hire great people, because if you don't hire great people that are passionate and really into what they're doing, unless you have no competition, you're probably not going to wind up on top. So, but so the people, I think, is certainly incredibly fundamental, obviously.
No, that's right. Now, the other thing is, you had a co-CEO, and you and Andy collaborated extremely well as co-CEOs, where I've seen a lot of co-situations like falling apart. So what was your secret of making it work so well?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a luck thing, in the sense that our skills were so complementary. Like Andy, to this day, we would always joke, like, he was co-CEO of a technology company, but he knew very little about technology, and probably to this day, but he was a fine, his background's banking. He could look at financial statements and understand things operationally by just looking at numbers, issues potentially, cost of implementations and things. all sorts of things where, he just knew that. So like that was one thing, but sales was his best attribute. I mean, he's a perpetual networker. He's passionate about, just talking to people, he would not be doing demos and never really barely use the product so much. It's sometimes, I shouldn't say, sometimes he got involved where he had expertise, but his best thing was from his banking days, having a network and being able to, get access to people who were relevant to, had the needs that we were solving, and be able to set up meetings and take calls, because you're dealing with a fairly, the selling in a portfolio manager, fairly busy people that have a lot of things to do. So having, that type of experience, that type of skill, I was more of he would be more of the, well, it depends on the situation, but he'd be more of the rah, and I'd probably be more the pessimist. It depends on what we were talking about, but I would always, be more critical looking at operational things. So, having him be able to be probably more often speaking at company engagements or spending more time, motivating people and getting people excited. And then, I'd be more of the, on the analytical side of, here's all the difficult things we need to do. So anyways, it worked out really well, where everything, our skill set, our experience was so complementary that together, I think we were a very strong CEO. That's probably, I don't know if that's reasonable for me to say that, but I feel that way, that together. And I don't, obviously me alone, I don't think I wouldn't have been nearly as effective, because I didn't have all those skills. So sometimes you get that in one person, or sometimes you get it where they don't have all those skills. And if they don't have other people around them, that are working that closely to augment it, it may not go as well. But so, yeah, I think that I'd say that's the key of our success. It wasn't a choice. We just got lucky that we had such complementary skills that were relevant to what we needed to do. And Kiet, I think we might have lost you. There we go. Okay,
we're back. We're back now. Something went haywire, so we're back.
No worries.
It's still live.
So that's it worked out. It doesn't work out for everybody, clearly, and sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. I hear more often it doesn't. I know every time we were that was a concern, but the second one went a different way for different reasons. But the first folks were like, yeah, that's not the best practice, and when they saw us in action and the terms of the way they communicated and all the means, like, we get it, keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, no, it's an amazing story. Like I rarely see it work out this well, and I think in this instant it worked out extremely well for everyone involved.
Yeah, he was an amazing partner. I feel very lucky that we just stumbled into each other.
That's right.
Steve Miller, by the way, Steve Miller, I have to thank for that. Steve was the one who knew he was potentially looking to do something different. So again, a lot of good advice and good network from, say, Steve, and then some luck on top of that.
So how important was early advisors, like people that's within the network that advise you early on?
Yeah. So no, good question. The advisors were early, because we had this so our angel investors, I say friends and family, there was some family for sure, but it was more business, former, business associates, people that, that knew us through Wall Street office, used Wall Street's office, et cetera. So the good news is most of these people came from the, institutional investment space, and they know formal structures. So they were giving us their 50,000, 100,000, whatever it was, but they were saying, hey, we're going to have a board, and you're going to have a board, and we're going to be on it, which was good. Because the first thing, but prior to Andy Horowitz, like Wall Street office, back when I was involved, there was nothing out there. So it would be offensive to the salespeople to say we didn't sell. They did sell, but there's no competition. In the early days, it was order taking in my mind. I mean, eventually there became, sales and more structure. But anyhow, long story short, the advisors right away said, "Oh, you need a salesperson," and that's ultimately how Andy came in as our first salesperson, and then that relationship grew. But I was like, "No, you don't need with software. You don't need sales; it sells itself." Right? That was my experience in the early days of Wall Street office. So fortunately, they won and got Andy involved, and which was we would have probably failed quickly without him being involved on sales, because this software, it was a different world. It didn't just sell itself. It wasn't order taking for the most part. So anyhow, so we were lucky again. They were lucky early on that we happened to have angel investors, so semi-informal investors, but the people that were savvy enough to know about best practices and have some oversight and reporting. It was a less formal board than a typical company, and even probably a typical startup these days. But there was still some structure and some required reporting, and definitely a lot of good advice along the way.
So, by the way, Steve just sent a note on. It's great having you on with all the excellent insight you're sharing.
Hi, Steve. Thanks.
So Jan 2020, 12 plus years on this baby you've created. Talk about the first day, the first week, the first month, like separation anxiety, like what's going through your mind?
Yeah. No, I mean, there was, the first bit was, like hanging out with employees and, saying, kind of, I'm sorry, not that they needed me, to be successful or be happy or whatever, but, there was a lot of deep, or still is a lot of deep relationships, when organizing we're continuing our annual offsite informally as a reunion format. But in any case, so it's spending time with people and, talking to them. So that was certainly the first bit. Because 12 years with many of these people, and 10 with many more, and so there's it was you never think it's going to end or change, but all things change and all things come to evolve, etc. So anyhow, so there was that, and I think one of the first things outside of work I did, I played. I guess COVID hit, and I played. My wife would not allow video games for it. We didn't have a video game console in the house, and so once COVID hit, she allowed that, and so I played The Last of Us, and sometime shortly after COVID, which was an amazing video game, as good as the HBO thing is. The video game's even more in depth. I think at the end of Last of Us 2, I think I might have been crying. It's pretty intense. I was not really ever a gamer, and still not a gamer, but that one was awesome. But anyways, so that I did. But outside of that, I started getting very involved in aviation. I had been involved in aviation. I had a couple, not at the same time, but kind of went through a couple planes, and sort of my reward was to get a turboprop, a Piper M600, which is it's not a jet, but it's the next level before that. So it's 300 miles an hour. I could get to East Coast in a day, and anyhow, but so I decided to pursue that and up my game. So I had been a private instrument pilot, and then I got my commercial license, and then I ended up buying a small fractional of a Honda jet program where you could fly it if you got the training. So I went to a 3-week course and I just got my SIC, but I got my multi-engine license. So there's all this training you have to do with that. I'm sure we don't want to make this an aviation seminar, but
you have a big test coming tomorrow, right?
Was that?
You have a big test coming tomorrow.
Yes, I do. So I got type rated for a couple different jets, and then the last sort of big certificate is called ATP, Air Transport Pilot. So if you want to fly for the airlines, you have to have that, and you have to have 1,500 hours. So I'm about 2,000 hours now, and I'm working on ATP. So tomorrow is my big written test, 150 questions in 4 hours or something. And so if I pass that, then the next step is to go for a check ride. And, they throw all these emergencies at you and fail everything on board, and you have to survive and do things reasonably well. So anyhow, so I'm excited about that. So that's been a career, and I do fly part-time for a part called charter, Part 135, which is generally wealthy people renting a jet for $40,000 or $50,000 for a round trip flight, and some what's called the SIC, so the first lieutenant, the co-pilot, whatever. So you actually fly the plane, you take off and land, but you have to sit in the right seat, and the captain is legally responsible for the flight. But that's been a lot of fun. So just jump on a small business jet, and you never know where you're going to end up. Someone calls, books the flight, and you're like, okay, let's go. Let's do the weather planning, the flight planning, and we'll take the plane from Jackson Hole to New York or whatever. So I do that part-time now. So that's a lot of fun for me.
And where else do you spend your time? I know you advise a company called Agile Blue. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so I've gotten involved. So I was involved in a company, I still am, called Semantic Evolution in London, and then I more recently got involved in a company called Agile Blue, and both of those pretty active, like not quite, certainly not a daily operator, but I was kind of functioning as pseudo part-time CFO for Agile Blue for a little while. They have a legit CFO now, but so I was spending quite a bit of time. I'm an investor, so it's fun. I hope that investment turns into something, but not getting paid, beyond that. But so that those, as my wife would often let me know, are taking a tremendous amount of time. Not so much anymore, but for periods, I was pretty active in that. So, but Agile Blue, to answer your question, is a software SOC as a service, so Security Operations Center as a service. Basically, they do a lot of things, but the foundation is cyber security, threat detection, having deployed software on devices, laptops, phones, any device to look for people hacking into the system, and then using their kind of specialty is using AI to filter it. So when the engine highlights a potential problem, it's much more likely to be a problem. And now there's manual resolution of those issues, and then there's automated resolution. So they're just kind of evolving down that, and they've been very successful. It's been tremendous growth in a short period of time, and it's I think that's one of those cases similar to the Black Mountain story, where you got the right people in place, but you're also happen to be at the right point in the market, right? Cybersecurity is a wonderful place to be in business. I think right now the need is tremendous. Things are getting more and more complicated. So I think, I'm excited about that one. I think that one it's doing very well. I think it could continue to do so.
I'm excited as well. So is the Tribeca team. So
I think that's going to be a good one. So it's been fun for sure. It's fun to see that too. Just the startup, right? It's a cool thing to start from. Now, wasn't involved when they were nothing, but I was involved fairly early, and certainly I'm more along for the ride to see their success. But it's pretty neat to see that rapid evolution of here's a foundation with a handful of clients, and just boom, growing into quickly maturing. And so it's been fun. So I think I like to do that. I don't think I'd necessarily do that full time because of the other interests I have. And as I mentioned to you earlier, the other one, which I'm here right now, we bought an inn. It's operated under the licensing of a bed and breakfast, but we don't do breakfast. But it ended up in Gig Harbor, Washington, right on the water. So we took this the prior owners took a fisherman's cottage that was built in 1918 and turned it into a little mini boutique hotel with a huge pier and dock in Gig Harbor, Washington, on the south side of Puget Sound. But then we're kind of trying to take it to the next level. So we're wrapping up a massive remodel, kind of every square inch of the property, to just, the location's absolutely amazing. So kind of trying to bring up the whole, the accommodations and to the level that we think is befitting of the location. So anyhow, so I'm actually up here. They're doing the photo shoot today, so you might see somebody walking around in the background. But so that's been fun for me, because it's a very small scale. It's it's a 8-bedroom home that operates as an inn, so it's a small scale, but it's fun just to do the same sort of thing just that you do in a bigger company. It's just optimize, like how get feedback, optimize. You literally get feedback from the guests. You go, you look at it yourself and like, okay, let's just optimize. And then so it's cool because like the place, because the location was so amazing, had pretty good reviews, but now like the reviews coming out are awesome, and it's a fun, it's kind of rewarding because it's very tangible, right? You build software and there's some tangibility, and you have a team, and that's tangible. But here it's very physical. You can see it, you can touch it, and so then sharing that with other people and having them appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun. So anyhow, so the aviation, being on boards, and then upgrading this and is kept me pretty busy.
Now, how do you decide which company to be on boards of? Like what goes to your decision process on getting involved? Because I would imagine the situation you are now is like your time is more precious than anything else, right? So what goes to that decision making in terms of which companies you want to support or be on boards of?
Yeah, I know I mean, to me, it's the network, because like I'm on all sorts of, somehow that I didn't subscribe for, get all sorts of emails every day about investment opportunities. Some of them sound like impressive. I'm kind of skeptical of fraud or whatever. So I generally never respond. So, but I do through the friends and business associates. Like Steve Miller is very active, and the other investors that are active, and so I'll share ideas with them, and they'll share ideas with me, and so it's usually from that network where at least the hurdle of, hey, this is not fraud, or it's not fraud that people I know about, and the people they're associated with are doing these, that there's some sort of level of competence and achievement that gets you past a hurdle of, hey, let's take a look and at this. So I think fortunately, we had software focused on institutional investors, so there's a decent network of people that have invested us in the past and are just in that space. And so I think fortunate enough to get stuff from that network. So that, and then once you have that, it's like, can I help? Am I just going to be sitting there as an investor, which is fine, but to be on a board, you need to add some value. So Agile Blue struck me as, I was not a security guy at all. We had an amazing security guy at Black Mountain, but I was not that. But the themes of the startup, just the startup themes about, hiring and manage, like they needed a financial model. So I took, Andy was our financial modeler, but this Agile Blue was early enough where I could do all the financial modeling. So I had a ton of experience that I developed in, what worked and what didn't at Black Mountain. So all these things I thought I could bring to the table and really help. So I think that, the short answer to your question is, for me, the network and only looking at opportunities where there's some basis where somebody and trust is saying, hey, this looks interesting. And then getting it on the board is, can I actually add value? Do I have experience that these folks, could benefit from and don't otherwise, necessarily have. So anyhow, that's the approach. I've just been involved in 2 companies. I'd probably be happy to pick up another 1 or 2. But I like an aspect of that, but I wouldn't, as much as I enjoy it, there's these other things I like to do. So I probably would want to keep that to halftime, so to speak.
That's right. Now, do you see yourself, launching another startup maybe next year, next 2 years, next few years again, or?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. I ask myself that, I don't know, there's some things, there's a magical number about 3s, right? There's
right.
trilogies and all that, but, I've been unable for certain agreements to work until June 30th of 2023, or at least work in a similar space that I was in. So I have more optionality coming up. So sometimes I think yes, but I'm also, like I said, passionate about aviation. I might, want to become a flight instructor and help introduce other people to that. For me, it's been an amazing experience. But, I will say, as soon as someone brings an idea that's relevant, where I think I can help, I can't help myself but to get very engaged and interested. So, I don't know. So I guess the short answer is, I don't know. Something might strike me towards like, okay, I'm going all in. But, I think more likely, being an advisor, and maybe an advisor at a level where I'm more engaged than, say, Agile Blue, where I add more value. Like, I know the space, because I don't know security. I don't know the SOC space. Like I know the fintech space for corporate debt and private debt and all that. So anyhow, so yeah, so I guess I'm still figuring that out now. I'm busy enough, and sort of, I've got a little bit more time, but maybe later this year I'll have sorted out if I'm going to do that.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Well, thank you, Kevin, for being on today. That was extremely insightful. I'm getting pings from people. That's why I shut off my phone, because I'm getting pings from people on how helpful this call has been. So usually where we end is it's really more for you in terms of, what are the type of people you want to connect with is within the network, and how can people help? Maybe it's people approaching you on the next idea, right? What would that be for you?
Sure. Yeah. No, I think if there's, I would say, I mean, I don't need anything out of this at all, but I appreciate that. But yeah, I'd say if there's areas out there where I can help, certainly part-time as in an advising role, at least initially, I'm potentially interested. So yeah, anyone who thinks I can be helpful, I'm open to a certain amount. I once I get involved, I can't help myself. I get more involved in probably.
Right.
But so there's that risk. If you don't want someone too involved, then you probably don't want to reach out to me. But yeah, no, and I'd love to. I think the right opportunity that I can get excited about, I'd probably spend more time and maybe completely end up focusing on it. But if there's something where, based on my background, someone thinks I can be helpful, absolutely, I'd love to talk about it.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Kevin, for being on today, and best of luck on your exam tomorrow.
All right, good. Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, I got to get back to studying that.
All right. Bye-bye. Thank you, everybody.
Bye. Thanks.
Appreciate it.